I'm Lawrence Luckenbill, and you are watching Trek Culture.
In terms of the finale, it's funny because fans will be like, we have to go back to watch everything to remember what happened, and we're in the same boat. So we're just like, I'm like, can you tell me? I know it's a cliffhanger, but I'm like, can you tell me what we were doing, where we were doing it? And in that time, we filmed season three, and then we've also been going to events, and so for us, our head is sometimes we forget what fans have seen and what we filmed and they haven't seen. So I've been on red carpets where they straight up have asked me questions that are totally, you know, basic, simple, I can answer, and I'm still like, you know what? I'm not going to answer. And then like the article will come out and be like, Melissa Navia said nothing. She said I could say nothing, and I was just like, yes. I said I hope my studio and all my bosses see that I am just saying nothing.
I can just imagine, and what do you expect? I'm not even in Star Trek. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right? Ooh, what? Where? When?
I, I think so. One of the most exciting things about Ortegas is that you are pretty much page one brand new character, which is there must be just this absolute breath of freedom with that as well. Like, how has I know you've spoken in interviews before, but I'm going to ask you again. How has your journey been from initially auditioning for the role to be, kind of discovering the wild world that is the Star Trek franchise?
Yeah, it has been a wild ride. There's been nothing mundane about the last few years for me. Like when did all this happen, right? We got cast in at the end of 2020, and then we started filming at the start of 2021. So it's wild. Like what do we now? It's 2025. But it's been a ride, and it's been incredible. And I'm often asked, and I'm sure I'll be asked for a long time to come. Were you a Trekkie before you were cast in the show? And I was like, I wouldn't have ever called myself a Trekkie, but I mean, I watched Star Trek growing up. I knew Star Trek. It's a very cool thing to be part of a franchise, to be welcomed into a family where pretty much anywhere you go in the world, people are watching your work because they have grown up with Star Trek. If they just started watching it, their grandparents, their parents have watched it. They're showing their kids. Like it's just, I when I go to conventions and I meet fans, like there's just I'm like, this is never gonna get normal, if you will, and also like you appreciate it so much because it really is just like it's a whole world. And people ask me, were you expecting this? And I said, well, you can't expect what you've never really experienced, but I'm not surprised because it's Star Trek. Like it's even people who don't watch it a lot. It touches so many different parts of our pop culture, and there's things out of the Star Trek world where you say it and people are like, oh, that's Star Trek. And so that's a very cool thing to enter into, and especially as like a working actor when you've been auditioning and working for so long to get on a show that's well written and beloved by fans and has some staying power, to have been kind of the big role that I landed with Star Trek. I'm like, I could not have asked for a better thing. Like this is everything that I wanted, in one package. And so it's been wild. It's been wild, but it's been like you said, it's like creating a new character. For me has been an incredible amount of freedom. I look at my co-stars who have to create characters out of characters who are so loved and who have a history, and we know where they've come from, and we know where they're going, and it's a whole other level of work and responsibility. And then I have a lot of work responsibility of my own because I have to create a character that fans do want to see more of, right? And they do want to, imagine having conversations with other characters and in fan fiction, and it has to be someone that you believe is part of this world. So for me, I always say that it was, right from the first audition, the writing and the character, or I'll say the writing was excellent. It was not difficult to see who Erica Ortegas was, and I could see myself breathing life into this role, and the fact that our showrunners and our casting directors saw it as well. It all just worked out. One of the things I remember, and I talk about it frequently because it really stayed with me, and I think about it every season, that producers said to us is that the bridge should reflect the world as it is. Very simple. And when our crew was announced, I remember after the fact, some people being like, oh, interesting. You know, if you think about it, there's actually more women on the bridge than men. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, but you almost didn't think about it because it wasn't, I don't think, a conscious thing. And that's how it should be, where it should just be like, we shouldn't be like, anytime there's one or two more women, it shouldn't be like, oh, that's crazy. Because again, like what I was saying with the Gina Davis Institute and the research they've done, and the fact that it makes me more aware of just being more conscious of what we're putting on our screens. And when you think about the world as it is, and all the women who are in, and specifically speaking about STEM related roles and things like even like piloting, right? So as the pilot of the Enterprise, I was reminded of a goal I had many, many years ago of flying a plane. And it was something that I took like, an intro class, and I liked it very much. And I've always loved flying, but it's very expensive and, working actor. So I put it to the side for a bit. And now that I'm in this role at conventions, especially when I hear from people of all ages, from all backgrounds, men, women, kids, non-binary folks, like everyone, it's this feeling of, when we see Erica, we see something in her that reminds us of us. And sometimes that's, I want to be a pilot because of Ortegas. Her confidence makes me want to go out into the world and be like that. And so the more that you hear from people, you're like, oh my God, that's really special and cool. And as a storyteller, which I think of myself first and foremost as a writer and an actor, as a storyteller, I'm like, that's what you want. You want people to see your story, the story that you're telling, and for it to influence their story. And so I've heard from so many people who've been watching Star Trek since the 60s, and yet they'll say stuff like, the first time that I actually see myself on the bridge is through your character. There was one woman who, she said that she is a senior engineer now, and she's in that capacity because of Star Trek. But yet, in all these years, she really feels that the first time she kind of saw herself was through the character of Erica. And I'm like, that's really cool and special. And that's thanks to the work of a lot of people. But what I keep coming back to is just like, and also like, there was this little girl once, she had to be like no taller than like this. I don't know if you know where the floor is from here. And she says she wants to be a pilot when she grows up because of Ortegas. And I'm like, that's amazing. And the amount of times I've gotten that from people of all ages, I'm like, that's a really special thing. And so it's the idea of like, when you see it, you realize that you can be it, and it was something that it took me a long time to realize, because as a kid, for some reason, I just didn't think like that. Like I used to look at roles, and so often, so many of the roles that I emulated and characters that I wanted to be were male roles because they were the coolest roles. And for me anyway, I was just always like, I felt like growing up, I was like, I'm never going to really see anybody who looks like me or is me. So I'm just going to have to do that one day, which is, it's a very kind of cocky, attitude to have. But for some reason, I've always just had this uncalled for self-esteem throughout my life. So I've just been like, one day that's just going to be me. I'm just going to do it. Why can't I be Indiana Jones, and also fall in love with Indiana Jones? Like why does it have to be something else? So for me, though, realizing that how important it is for people to be able to see what they are, what they want to be, and also the way that the world is, so that we don't, make it seem as if we're creating a reality and also a future that isn't real. And so much of Star Trek too is, I know it's very idealistic at times, right? But the idea is that we can overcome our adversity if we work together. And I know sometimes you look at the news and I'm like, how are we going to do this? But the idea is that I believe it can be done.
Say someone like Spock, well, we kind of know Spock. Obviously, Ethan is very much doing his own thing, and the show's doing their own thing, but we kind of have an idea about Spock. Whereas Ortegas can go with literally any direction. And also, don't think we haven't noticed the little tidbits that are just dropped in across. She's lived.
Yes, thank you. And also, there's all sorts of things too that are like underneath that nobody ever finds out about, or like storylines that I have for her, that there's things that I can't even. So this is also the weird thing, right? Because we're filming and things are coming out, so there's almost so much I can't even say. But like fans will like ask, is this going to be happening? And I would be like, oh, I don't know, I can't say anything. But I'm always just like in my head, I'm like, it's already happened, and like yeah, there's just like a lot that it's just the head is always going, my mind is always going. There's always layers. So like people are like sometimes like there'll be like a scene, they'll be like, she just has like a few words, and somehow it feels like it matters. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like that's the acting, but it's also it's everything that you're layering into it, and then the freedom of our creative team trusting us with us doing that. And there's stuff too. There's things that sometimes happen on set. Like I'm very I'm always I don't know if careful or precious is the right word, but I'm always like I know how difficult it is to write an amazing piece of work. And so when we get a script, I'm very I'm very word perfect, And so when we're on set, now that we can kind of have the writers there all the time, because we're not in COVID times anymore, if there's anything that I kind of want to change, even small, like I'll check with them. But there'll be sometimes things where, and so often they're always just like, yeah. Or if it can't be changed, they'll explain kind of the reasoning, but they'll talk it out with us. But sometimes there'll be things that we want to change, or some things so that I'll ad lib at the end of something, and they'll be like, no, that's great, no, leave that in there, and I'll be like, oh, cool. So yeah, but so much of that's able to happen because we have such a very cool, open, and relaxed set atmosphere, and we trust each other, and we want everyone to shine in the scenes, and so it all kind of ends up right in the end.
It sounds like there's a lot of trust there as well. That you're obviously very comfortable with each other. Also, do you know what? When one doesn't watch the bloopers, you can't prove that we didn't have a whole episode about Captain Ortegas. I'm just saying it. Just saying it right there.
Exactly. All sorts of things. Oh, and then also like our album. You could also buy that.
Yep.
That's lots of fun.
Yeah. I was at I think it was at Trek to Vegas there last year. And it was one of the panels, and I think it was, what was the one thing you changed? A song for Ortegas. So
yes.
In the sequel.
Oh, yes, that's still right. That still totally gets me. Like when we joke about our, like when Chrissy and I joke about well, we're not joking though, we're quite serious. But an actual Strange New Worlds Broadway run. I'm like, that's going to be there's going to be an Ortegas song. However, and I've talked about this before, that writing wise, it totally makes sense story wise why she didn't burst out into song, because everyone was going through all this emotional turmoil and relationship, high school drama, and Ortegas is just cool and collected, and she's got her stuff together. And so when she does sing, it's just like, I'm amazing. And then she has that, she does, some ensemble numbers, and Chapel, Jess's song, was a lot of fun because I got to dance. So yeah, but an Ortegas song.
It reminds me of there's that it's an old episode of The Simpsons, and they're doing a pun on The Shining, and Marge finds the typewriter, and your big deep dark secret is feeling fine. All is good, right? There's like 100%. It works.
Nothing to break out into song about.
That's right. I mean, the last we saw, she seems to have been beamed away by a Gorn. If there is a musical coming up, could be one of the darker ones. We'll see. Right. But I
have to say, I don't actually know who anyone was beamed away by. Got to put that out there.
Cool. That.
Like, was it beamed at all? I don't know. Do you? No, you don't know.
I don't know. Sorry, the pilot episode, but but actually, like, funnily enough, generally, so although Ortega is pretty much cool the whole time, the season 1 finale, Equality, where we do this sort of imagined jump into the future, and we have the Romulan War, and Ortega seems to have gone through something with the Romulans. So this is where you got the future Pike.
Oh yes.
And Pike, and you're playing that role, the Styles, the one back from Balance of Terror. And I was watching it going like, but she's so chill. What's happened? Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah. And the whole thing with that episode, that was such a cool episode to shoot. And Chris Fisher, who is amazing and a massive part of our show, and he's our producer, director, and just a wonderful human. He directed that episode, and I remember when we sat down to talk about it, like in our director's meeting, and he was just like, he's like, everyone loves Ortegas. He's like, if anyone's gonna get a drink with someone, they're gonna get it with Ortegas. Like and Ortegas can get a drink with anyone in any department on the ship, right? Like that's the feeling. And then he says, but in this episode, we don't want to like Ortegas. And I was like, so it's a completely different shift. And so there were some fans who were just like, what happened? I don't like, it was darker, and she would, was feeling a certain way and doing things and saying things that were not what we want our hero to be doing. But what I loved about that, I loved so much about that episode, but also and how it mirrored, right, the TOS episode, and then was also its own thing. But it also kind of, and I'm trying to bring my head back to it. You're asking a lot of me today, Sean.
And you're doing great. You're doing absolutely brilliantly.
Thank you. Like, where it was just like, and the idea, right, was that it was a timeline that is not correct, right? Because the whole point, if I remember correctly, was that you shouldn't play with the future, because then things should happen as they are not supposed to happen. This idea that, things happen, and even as upset as we are about it, they happen for a reason. And so don't play with the future, because essentially we were in a timeline that isn't supposed to exist. And so things are a little skewed. But what I saw with her and in the dialogue and in the script was someone who was coming from a place where she had been hurt, where her friends and family had been hurt by a force, an opponent, an enemy, if you will, who it seemed was doing things with impunity. And so it's where that anger is coming from. And so it was interesting when some fans were like, immediately they were just like, like, oh my God, we don't like this at all. Why does she have to play this character? And I'm like, if you think about it though, it's like when we see people who are kind of reacting or doing things in a certain way, or angry, or if we immediately shut them down, like there's no room for growth. So for me, when I was reading that script, what I was looking at this wrong timeline Ortegas was what has happened that has made her so angry, and it's essentially it's anger and grief, because she's lost people and there has been no responsibility taken. And so then sometimes people become, they grow from that, and other times they go down a darker avenue. They go down a darker, sidewalk, whatever. What is the saying? They go down a darker path, or they use that experience and they grow from it. So for me, it was just interesting. It was very like, I kind of like took it and I was thinking about it. I was just like, I was like, when we see people in kind of that darkness and that anger and that, and if we have the energy to speak to it, that's an opportunity to do it. So everyone who, like, not everyone, but there were some people who were just like, I don't like this at all. And I was just like, yeah, but when you look at why the character was maybe doing that, and it wasn't the Ortegas from the timeline that is as it should be, it kind of worked. It worked for me. And I liked also getting to play that darker side. And then, when her and Pike go at it, Ortegas does not like getting yelled at by Pike. I know, I didn't like that.
Wow, I think we were watching, we were like, that was, many things about that episode are a bit like, whoa, but that it felt wrong. It's like this is when something's gone very wrong in this timeline.
Yeah, totally. And that's exactly when Chris Fisher met with me, he was just like, he's like, that's what we want. He's like, we want it to not feel great. Everyone's like, Ortegas is great. This is going to be, something is not right. And I'm like, mission accomplished.
Thank you so much for watching this abbreviated version of this podcast. Now, if you go to our audio platforms, you will get the full version of this podcast with this guest. So we really, really appreciate you subscribing to that, and you're just awesome and wonderful. Thank you so much.